Roman conquests. When we talk about Muggle wars affecting the wizarding world, your first thought is probably the European witch hunts. We'll get to that one, don't worry. But what you probably don't know is that the real damage and honestly the real upgrade started over 1,000 years earlier, with an empire that didn't even know magic existed, starting with the Romans. Okay, so the Romans invaded Britain, armies, legions, forts, the whole empire expanding thing. It started around 200 BC and ran for 600 years, and it accidentally built the skeleton modern magic still runs on. For 600 years, Roman legions marched through Britain, Gaul, Greece, and Egypt, dismantling wizarding communities along the way without even knowing they existed. Just another busy campaign season. The Druids were the first casualty. When Roman forces massacred the sacred groves of Mona in 60 AD, they eliminated the most organized magical tradition in Celtic Britain. Centuries of oral spellwork, protective enchantments, and divination carried entirely in people's heads. The people were gone, the knowledge was gone with them. This is the earliest known case of a Muggle conflict wiping out a wizarding community entirely, long before the Statute of Secrecy made hiding official policy. The same military routes that caused the damage also moved knowledge in other directions. Roman roads, basically ancient Wi-Fi, except instead of memes it was Greek alchemical texts and Egyptian protective magic spreading across the wizarding world. The exchange happened because Rome built the roads for war, which sounds great until you remember what kind of knowledge existed in Greece. Because Greece had Herpo the Foul, the first dark wizard in recorded history, creator of the first basilisk, the first wizard ever confirmed to split his soul into a Horcrux. His work predates Rome, but Roman expansion through Greece carried his texts and ideas west along the same roads as everything else. So yeah, the wizarding world's most dangerous ideas got their first distribution deal courtesy of the Roman military, accidentally. And fun fact, Lumos, Accio, Expelliarmus, all modified Latin. Crucio translates directly as I torture, battlefield vocabulary repurposed for wands. 2,000 years later, Hogwarts students are still casting spells in a dead empire's grammar. Julius Caesar probably thought he was conquering territory. Turns out he was also accidentally upgrading wizard civilization. Crusades. Before we get into the Crusades, here's the Harry Potter detail that reframes this entire chapter. The Order of Merlin, yes, the one on every chocolate frog card, was created because of how badly this era went for the wizarding world. So from 1096 to 1291, nearly 2 centuries, medieval Europe decided to take the Holy Land back. Armies, sieges, knights marching east. Officially in the name of religion. In practice, the most consequential knowledge transfer in wizarding history. While Muggle armies fought over holy sites, European wizards used the chaos as cover for something far more interesting: raiding Eastern libraries. Before the Crusades, European magic was almost entirely focused on wand work and basic spell casting. The contact with the Eastern world changed that completely. Advanced alchemy, ancient runes, arithmancy, all of it flooded into European wizarding society through the same military routes Muggle knights were using to find glory. The knights found very little of it. Wizards did considerably better. Translation: 2 centuries of Muggle warfare accidentally built the Hogwarts curriculum. Here's the part that reframes everything. Later wizarding historians connected this era to a famous debate attributed to Merlin himself. Wizards should never fight in Muggle wars. That debate echoed through wizarding history for the next 800 years, and eventually became the founding principle of the Order of Merlin. Fun fact, the International Warlock Convention of 1289, the first formal attempt at international wizarding law, was convened 2 years before the fall of Acre ended the Crusades entirely. Wizards looked at 2 centuries of organized Muggle warfare and collectively decided that hiding was their smarter long-term strategy. The Statute of Secrecy came later, but the idea started here. Honestly, the Crusades taught wizards 2 things. Eastern magic was worth having. Muggle wars were absolutely not worth joining. Mongol invasions. This one matters for one name in particular, Nicholas Flamel, but we'll get to that. Starting in 1206 and expanding for over a century, Mongol armies swept across Eurasia, connecting China, Persia, and Europe through sheer military force. Mongol wars put Eurasia on the move. Scholars fled, artisans were relocated, translators scattered, wizarding communities moved with them, and Persian alchemy and Eastern potion craft ended up in European hands as collateral. War scattered knowledge across the continent whether anyone wanted it to move or not. it. And here's the part that connects directly to Hogwarts. Nicholas Flamel, the only wizard in history to successfully create a Philosopher's Stone, was born in 1327, right in the middle of the Mongol era. He grew up in a Europe suddenly flooded with Persian texts and Eastern alchemical theory, flowing through Mongol trade routes, knowledge that Western wizards had never accessed before. Honestly, Flamel's achievement looks a lot less mysterious when you factor in what was sitting in European libraries by the time he started studying. Genghis Khan thought he was building an empire. Turns out he was also accidentally stalking Hogwarts library. European witch hunts. Then the witch hunt started, and the wizarding world was never the same again. Between the 15th and 17th centuries, Muggle fear of the unexplained turned organized and lethal. Magical families who had lived alongside Muggle society for generations, quietly, carefully, usefully, suddenly had nowhere safe to exist. The choice became simple: disappear completely or get caught. Most disappeared. The ones who didn't had interesting reasons. Gwendolyn the Weird, for instance, enjoyed being caught. Genuinely enjoyed it. Kinda weird. If the name doesn't ring a bell, she's on a chocolate frog card. One of the most famous witches of the medieval period. Her entire legacy is essentially that she allowed Muggle witch hunters to arrest her 47 times across Europe, each time in a different disguise. She used a flame-freezing charm which turned execution by fire into what witnesses described as a pleasant, tickling sensation. Fun. Honestly, the audacity is impressive, even if the timing was terrible. The witch hunts did something the wizarding world hadn't managed to do on its own. They forced it to get organized. The International Statute of Secrecy followed in 1692, and the Ministry of Magic in 1707. Obliviators, memory modification, entire departments dedicated to covering magical incidents. All of it built directly in response to what the hunts revealed about magical vulnerability. The Ministry of Magic basically owes its entire existence to a bunch of Muggle villagers with torches. Awkward. English Civil War. Between 1642 and 1651, Britain spent a decade executing its own king and burning through two governments. Wizards watched the whole thing and reached one conclusion: time to build something of their own. For generations, magical families had operated quietly inside Muggle royal courts. Advisors, influencers, the kind of people who stood just behind the throne. And here's the real gossip. The Malfoys are the most obvious example. Earlier that century, the first Lucius Malfoy had attempted to marry Queen Elizabeth I, a move so aggressively on brand for that family it barely needs commentary. Unsurprisingly, she declined. He was not subtle about his disappointment. That was the last time any Malfoy seriously attempted to connect with Muggle power through anything other than contempt. The English Civil War made the arrangement look genuinely precarious. Muggle power turned out to be considerably less stable than advertised. The embarrassing part, wizards had spent centuries carefully cultivating influence with whoever was in charge. Then in the space of a decade, whoever was in charge became a rotating position. Royalists lost when Parliament won. Parliament lost when Cromwell won. Cromwell's regime collapsed when he died. The magical families who had carefully backed the wrong side, which was essentially everyone, because the sides kept changing, spent the better part of 15 years quietly relocating, rebranding, and pretending they'd never met anyone named Charles. The magical elite started pulling back from Muggle politics entirely. Watching a king lose his head in public tends to have that effect. Who knew? The Statute of Secrecy came in 1692. The Ministry of Magic followed in 1707. Both arrived because the Civil War demonstrated something wizards couldn't ignore. Muggle governments collapsed, ideologies shifted, and magical communities caught in the middle had very little protection. Translation: one beheaded king was all it took to convince wizards to stop advising Muggle rulers and start building a government nobody could behead them in. Napoleonic Wars. And this one matters for a reason most fans completely miss: the Ministry of Magic's relationship with the Muggle Prime Minister. This is where it started. From 1803 to 1815, Napoleonic armies moved at a scale the Statute of Secrecy was simply never designed for. Hundreds of thousands of Muggle soldiers crossed the same landscapes where magical communities had been quietly hiding since 1692. The secrecy infrastructure built over a century started showing serious cracks. But the real problem appeared elsewhere. While Napoleon was busy rearranging Europe's borders, the disruption of magical boundaries triggered something the ministry was completely unprepared for: werewolf packs moving into unprotected territory, troll migrations following military supply routes, centaur herds abandoning their established grounds as forests were cleared for encampments. Basically, the ministry had to manage full magical creature crisis across 3 continents simultaneously, in complete secrecy, while a Muggle war was happening on top of it. Nobody got credit for any of it, obviously. Quick note, that pressure is exactly why the British Ministry of Magic magic finally showed up at the Muggle Prime Minister's door. The portrait in the corner of the office was already there. The Prime Minister just hadn't been told what it was for yet. An awkward yet necessary meeting. The war also reshuffled European magical society. Old French magical families migrated toward Britain as Napoleonic chaos dismantled the French magical establishment. They arrived with money, old opinions, and a very specific attitude toward Muggle political instability, and never really left. Turns out 12 years of warfare left the wizarding world more bureaucratic, more isolated, and slightly more français. American Civil War. Between 1861 and 1865, the war settled something American wizards had been debating for decades. European wand cores, phoenix feather, unicorn hair, required materials that had to cross an ocean. Wampus cat hair, horned serpent horn, local American cores were right there, proven, and considerably easier to source when transatlantic supply routes were unreliable. American wand makers stopped looking at Ollivanders for guides and started trusting their own materials entirely. The gap between European and American magical traditions, already growing since Ilvermorty's founding, became permanent. Quick note, this is exactly the cultural divide you see in Fantastic Beasts. MACUSA operating on completely different rules, treating European magical customs as optional suggestions at best. That attitude didn't come from nowhere. Turns out a civil war is surprisingly effective at convincing a magical community it doesn't need the old world anymore. America spent 4 years fighting itself. MACUSA spent 4 years doing cleanup. World War I, the war to end all wars. From 1914 to 1918, while Muggle armies collapsed into trenches across Europe, the magical community faced an uncomfortable question. When millions of people are dying around you, do you help? The answer officially was not a chance. The Statute of Secrecy held. Unofficially, things got complicated. Newt Scamander served on the Eastern Front during the war, working with magical creatures and conditions that would make most wizards quit immediately. He didn't quit. Turns out surviving a war alongside magical creatures is excellent motivation for writing the book Hogwarts made required reading. Meanwhile, Gellert Grindelwald watched the whole war and reached a completely different conclusion. Muggles killing each other by the millions, it was evidence, proof that wizards needed to stop hiding and start ruling. Turns out we could do better than this, is exactly how dark wizard movements get started. Grindelwald spent the next 3 decades building on that idea, quietly at first, then very loudly. Honestly, the First World War didn't just kill millions of Muggles. It handed Grindelwald his entire recruitment pitch. World War II. 1926 London, a boy named Tom Riddle is born in a Muggle orphanage. Here's the detail most fans don't connect. The London Blitz ran from 1940 to 1941. Tom Riddle was 14. The future Lord Voldemort, heir of Slytherin, obsessed with immortality, terrified of death, spent his formative years in a city being bombed. But at least he still had his nose to comfort him. Muggle weapons that didn't care about magical bloodlines. Bombs that would kill a Dark Lord just as efficiently as anyone else. Timeline gets darker from there. In 1943, age 16, Riddle created his first 2 Horcruxes. The diary using the murder of Myrtle Warren at Hogwarts, and the ring using the murder of his own Muggle father over the summer. While Muggle Europe was burning, he was solving the problem of death in Hogwarts corridors, and a summer trip to Little Hangleton that ended very badly for the Riddle family. The war outside was the background to his worst decisions, which is saying something. True Potterheads know Death Eater ideology mirrors Nazi ideology. Pureblood hierarchy, magical supremacy, systematic elimination of the inferior. Grindelwald fell in 1945, the same year Nazi Germany collapsed. 2 dark regimes, 1 year, both defeated. The parallel is hard to miss. Cornelius Fudge's refusal to acknowledge Voldemort's return maps almost exactly onto Neville's Chamberlain's appeasement policy. Different war, same catastrophic mistake. Cold War. The Cold War never involved a single magical battle. 44 years of it, 1947 to 1991, and not one official spell fired. But the atmosphere it created, surveillance, suspicion, ideological loyalty tests, filtered directly into wizarding society. The Ministry of Magic spent the 1970s in a state of genuine terror, and not because of anything Muggles were doing. Voldemort's first rise happened right in the middle of it. Death Eaters using tactics straight from the Cold War playbook. Secret networks, informants, ideological purges. The Ministry responded with its own surveillance toolkit. Secrecy sensors, sneakoscopes, probity probes. Every Ministry employee checked, every student monitored. The paranoia was completely mutual. The wand world split along similar lines. Ollivander in Britain, Grigorovich in Eastern Europe. 2 masters, 2 camps. Victor Krum used a Grigorovich wand. In certain circles, that meant something. Here's the detail that connects both worlds directly. Kingsley Shacklebolt, Order of the Phoenix member, was embedded inside Muggle government as a protection officer for the Prime Minister. The magical world was watching Muggle leadership from the inside. side just in case. Here's what's actually uncomfortable about this chapter. The ministry's response to Voldemort, surveillance, loyalty tests, paranoia, punishing people for the wrong associations, wasn't that different from what they were fighting against. That part the History of Magic textbook definitely leaves out. Turns out the most dangerous era in wizarding history ran parallel to the most paranoid era in Muggle history. Probably not a coincidence. And if you survive this Muggle history lesson, you're ready for the magical version. All 5 Wizarding Wars in Harry Potter Explained. Watch now before Voldemort remembers where he left his nose.